Okay, good evening, everyone. This is Sachin Karnik here. Today is the 15th of January, 2025. We are on part number 11 of the Foundations of Angel Wing workshop series. This is based on the Foundations of Angel Wing Volume 1, 813-page book that was published several months ago. We are going through the various sections of this book as well as the PowerPoints and other materials to better understand these ideas. Please do keep in mind that it is highly recommended for each person to listen to this series from the beginning. It is quite technical, or it can be quite technical. That is why it is a technical presentation. Certainly, any participants may interrupt while the presentation is going on. I will speak for a good half an hour or so, and then we will try to stop around 8. I mean, we can go beyond 8 o'clock, but if people need to log off at that point, that's perfectly okay. Right? So we've had various people log in and log off over the last 10 sessions. So today we're continuing just from where we left off last time. So I'm not going to do too much repetition of the ideas presented thus far. We'll just pick it up from where we were and kind of take it from there. So today we're looking at the unraveling the complexity of selfhood and personal identity, and looking at this in terms of philosophy and neuroscience. So the understanding of selfhood as distinguished from personal identity forms a cornerstone of human cognitive and philosophical studies. Let's understand each point carefully. So researchers have they've created two different constructs: selfhood versus personal identity. Right? So selfhood implies a unique and individual perspective intrinsic to each person, encompassing the spectrum of their experiences and perceptions. We as individuals, we as selves, we as human beings, we have our own unique and individual perspective. These perspectives are intrinsic. What perspectives of what? Of ourselves, of others, of the world, etc. So selfhood as a construct has this meaning, this intrinsic sense of who we are. It encompasses the vast spectrum of experiences and perceptions. Right? So it is firmly anchored in the first person perspective, accentuating the unique thoughts, feelings, and experiences that are directly accessible only to the individual in question. So an individual like myself, I have my own first person perspective. That perspective is something that is firmly anchored, meaning that selfhood is firmly anchored in the first person perspective. The concept of selfhood, the sense of who I am as an individual, is anchored in my first person perspective. And it is accentuated, it is accentuating the unique thoughts, feelings, and experiences. They're unique thoughts, unique feelings, unique experiences that are only accessible to me, that are directly accessible only to the person in question. It's very interesting, that selfhood has that type of conceptualization behind it, because there are internal thoughts, internal feelings, and experiences unique. It is something that is a way of researchers trying to grasp what is the self. And that is the question we have been grappling with. The first entry was the intricacies of selfhood and subjectivity. Now we're going further on the same topic from some additional angles here. So now, in contrast to selfhood, personal identity is a broader concept that pertains to characteristics that render individuals the same across time. I have a sense that I'm the same person. Well, all right. Where does that come from? Well, we can say that that's personal identity, or that's at least some type of a developed identity. And other people could have some similar identity also. And I think some of this actually we talked about last time. So this encompasses societal roles, traits, and characteristics that define an individual within a communal context. We don't live in isolation, we live in the community. So our sense of personal identity, which is that experience of sameness that continues from year to year or across time in general, that is only possible in the context of the community, in the context of the roles that have been given to us or that we have adopted, the various identity and personality traits, as well as characteristics that we have that define us, extending beyond the boundaries of personal experience and perceptions. We have personal experience. We have our own perceptions. So personal identity is a much broader phenomena, is a much broader reality than selfhood. And I know this is difficult and it is a bit technical. And this is the way researchers have tried to tease these ideas out. So let's just be very clear, because this can get very tricky to understand. I want to make sure it's extremely clear that selfhood is my unique first-person experience perspective. I see the color red, that's my perception. I put a donut in my mouth, that's my experience. But the sense of me that is consistent from yesterday to day before yesterday to a year ago to 5 years ago, I still have some sense that I'm still the same individual. That is personal identity, but that doesn't mean that that is not dynamic. It has been developing and evolving over the years, but it is a much broader idea than selfhood. And this is at least one way that researchers have talked about this. So the personal identity that is formed for year after year after year, it encompasses societal roles. We live in the society with various roles. There's traits, there's all kinds of personality traits that have evolved and developed over many, many years. And there are characteristics that are part of our sense of identity that define an individual. That's it. This is Sachin Karnik. That defines who I am within the context of community, overall community. That could be religious community, family community, the dominant culture or the minority culture, whatever. All of that is there. But it definitely is extending beyond the boundaries of personal experience and perception. Personal experiences I do have. They are connected. They do overlap together. So selfhood, which is this term here, selfhood and personal identity, they definitely overlap and they are interconnected, but they are also considered to be different constructs. So such aspects often include categorization and labeling, indicating a focus on shared features rather than unique individual experiences. An interesting distinction lies in the reference terms used for selfhood and personal identity. While person generally serves as a third-person reference, implying an objective detachment, selfhood is fundamentally a first-person concept. So we can say that there are 50 people in the group, and there's some commonality in that group. But each individual is still having their own first-person experience. This highlights the difference between external perceptions of an individual and the individual's internal subjective experience of selfhood, right? So there's a difference between external perceptions that how others are seeing me as an individual, even how I'm seeing myself as an individual, and then my own inner experience of who I am, of my inner experience of life in general. Okay. Now, having said that, this highlights the difference between external perceptions and the individual's internal subjective experience of selfhood. However, personal identity can be significantly compromised under certain conditions, such as a neurodegenerative disease like late-stage Alzheimer's. Let's look at this sentence here carefully. Personal identity can be significantly compromised under certain conditions if there's a disease, a neurodegenerative disease like late-stage Alzheimer's, What happens in that? Individuals might experience a devastating loss of memory, forgetting their personal history, or failing to recognize their own reflection. They see themselves, they don't recognize themselves because there's damage to the brain or there's a problem in the brain. This demonstrates the critical role cognitive function plays in the preservation and continuity of personal identity. Which means that our brain is very much involved in our sense of the me, in constructing the individual internal experience, so many things, right? Which is again indicative of the need for a very healthy, sane brain. Otherwise, the sense of identity may not develop, or it will be damaged. So this demonstrates the critical role cognitive function plays in preservation and continuity of personal identity. Of course, that's very clear. So moving beyond the individual, the concept of selfhood is distinctly differentiated from others. That I see myself as different from others. This self versus others, differentiation, this self versus other differentiation refers to the cognitive and perceptual disparities between an individual's personal experience and the perception of others. So it is not simply a matter of distinction of sameness or otherness, but a complex interplay of subjective and objective experiences that shape an individual's self-perception and understanding of their surroundings. I have my perception of myself, I have my understanding of my surroundings, but there's a massive objective and subjective interplay. There's a lot of factors going on to bring that about. To bring about the sense that I am different from somebody else. How does that even happen? So it is not simply a distinction of sameness or otherness, but a complex interplay of subjective and objective experiences that shape an individual's perceptions. The fact that I say that I'm different from you, there's a lot involved in that. My own subjectivity, my own brain function, my own genetic factors, and then of course the objectivity of the experiences themselves. All of that is involved. So this dichotomy constitutes a substantial area of research in several academic disciplines, such as contemporary philosophy and phenomenology. Let's understand this sentence here. So this is a matter of research. There's a lot of research going on here, even today in many universities, that is trying to understand, where does our first person experience come from? Our experiences, the actual experiences through the senses and of the world outside and of ourselves, which is phenomenology. That's what this word means. Phenomenology is the study of experience. So there's no one answer. There's a neurological dimension. There's a psychological dimension. There's identity formation. There is the parent-child relationship. There's the environmental influences. There are hundreds of such factors that are involved in the construction of individualized identity as well as personhood. Both of them, So now, it is also a topic of significant interest in psychology, psychiatry, neurology, and neuroscience. Why those areas? Because psychology is a scientific study of mind. It is a study of mind in many different ways. That's psychology, and they all intersect together. Psychiatry, why is this important? Because there are so many psych meds given to thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people all over the world, millions actually, because it is an attempt to change brain chemistry, to change the experience we're having. That's what psychiatry is all about. Psychiatry is a medical field. It is a medical field that prescribes, where MDs or DOs who are psychiatrists, they prescribe medicines that directly cross the blood-brain barrier, go into the brain, and act on the neurotransmitter levels, like SSRIs, and there's so many categories of these medicines that change the experience in an attempt to rebalance the brain chemistry to produce the best quality, normalized experience of life, which is brain-based experience. That's what psychiatry is all about. That's psychiatry. All right, now, fields like neurology, where do they come into the picture? Well, neurology is looking at neuroanatomy and neurophysiology. They're all connected, of course, but neurology is looking specifically at the structure of the brain and the synapses within the spinal cord of the brain and rest of the body. Is looking at the morphology, the development of the neurons and things like that, and then to map them out so that to determine what function they have, what they control in the body, and then our experience of identity. So our experience of identity, selfhood, these two constructs we're looking at, we've been looking at for the last 7 or 8 discussions here, because the first 2 were about just an introduction. The last 9 presentations have just been on these two constructs, subjectivity and personhood. And now we're going into seeing how these professional disciplines are involved in this study. And that's really, really amazing, because the study of neurology, if you have a neurologist, and a psychiatrist, the psychiatrist is going to prescribe medicines to change brain chemistry. Neurologist is going to look at the way the neurons function, how they're structured. Is there a problem in their development, things like that. You see, so that's also involved in personal identity and selfhood. And then neuroscience in general. There's behavioral neuroscience. Neuroscience means what? That's the general field. That the way the various parts of the brain, they come together, function together, like the corpus callosum, for example, that bridges the left and right hemisphere, and then how they function together. So it's neurophysiology, neuroanatomy. The neurology also studies, but there's an area called behavioral neuroscience that looks at how our behavior, our external actions, are dictated by neurological function. That is called behavioral neuroscience. So these fields seek to explore and unravel the intricacies of self-perception and identity, casting light on the complexities of human cognition and consciousness. And that's the beauty of now interdisciplinary approaches throughout major universities, laboratories, as well as many qualitative, quantitative studies. I mean, it's extensive. There are thousands upon thousands of peer-reviewed journal articles on these subjects. Thousands. I mean, it's not a small number. So these fields, they're trying to come together to explore and unravel the intricacies of self-perception and identity. And then we can also add to this things like what we're working on: meditation, self-probing, self-mastery. We are also trying to become more aware of what our processes are, what our thoughts are, our emotions, our feelings are. So that kind of approach, we're using mind-brain body connection, things like that. I mean, we're not certainly, we're not teaching technically what is behavioral neuroscience, and we're not going into that kind of depth at this stage, at least. But at the same time, we will go into some of those ideas. But anyway, you will see what is involved here. That subjective experience is indubitably central to the construct of selfhood. Now, that's the mystery, the subjective experience, my experience, the sense of who I am, the sense of my own ego, my own sense of me is central, is undoubtedly central. That's what it indubitably means. It's indubitably central, undoubtedly central to the construct of selfhood. My overall sense of me has everything to do with my subjective experience. Now, it highlights the fundamental role. Let's look at this sentence, the next one. It highlights the fundamental role personal internal experiences play in shaping an individual's perception of their own self. My experience of who I am is shaped by what? By my own perception of who I am. How do I see myself? But I don't see myself without the community context, without the family context, without the context of the overall set of relationships I have. It's very difficult to see myself without those contexts, which is itself very interesting, right? So internal experience plays a massive role in shaping my own perception of who I am. That's my inner experience. Yet, this subjectivity also presents notable challenges, particularly in the philosophical and scientific exploration of selfhood. Now, what does that mean? Philosophical exploration means using one's intellect to probe into the questions of the self, into identity, into subjectivity, into phenomenology, into mind-brain-body connection, mind-brain dualism. All those kinds of questions are asked. Many questions like qualia. So many things are there in philosophy of mind. Massive areas, massive technical terminology is there. So that probing using human intellect philosophically is what the philosophical is the enterprise in philosophy of mind. So subjectivity is a notable challenge. How do you explain subjectivity? So they try to do so. Philosophers try to do so, and scientists try to do so both. So you've got two major strands, and they also connect together. The scientists are looking at it empirically, brain science and fMRIs and neuroscience and mapping the brain and looking at the way the neurons are firing and all that, and neural structure and all kinds of stuff like that. Very, very intricate. It's very powerful. But at the same time, the philosophers will say, yeah, you may understand all that, but hold on. Let's look at it. Let's try to use inquiry. Let's try to use phenomenology. Let's try to just reflect using our intellectual abilities to try to unravel the mystery of subjectivity. And then you've got religious traditions doing the same thing, based on faith, based on authority, based on scriptures, things like that, to try to come to realization of who am I, what am I, or what I want to be. For example, the concept of being reborn, like in Christianity, it has to do with the rebirth of the subjective self. That's a more religious angle to understand the self and at the same time for it to evolve into something much greater. There's, of course, the philosophical study of religion, and then there is the religious development where philosophical musing in the intellect is used as a support for the justification of a religious path, which we will talk about on Thursday evenings in more detail. But that's the intersection here, how they intersect together, between philosophy, religion, and neuroscientific study. How do they actually come together? So one way, it's pretty straightforward. I think we can understand it, that someone who has faith in the scripture, they have developed faith somehow based on some philosophical base or some intellectual probing understanding. So faith is born that way. We've talked about that before. So philosophical enterprise can serve as an aid for faith and development, more religious connection. It can go the other way also, that the religious faith and development could evolve later on out of deep philosophical inquiry, or it could even be destroyed by philosophical inquiry. So a philosophical inquiry can lead to anything altogether. So there's so many perspectives here. But we're talking about subjectivity. We got several words here. Subjectivity is my own experience. For example, if I had a conversation with someone who I haven't seen in 15 years, and now I'm talking to that person after so many years, what happens? It's a subjective experience? Yes. Is it related to my identity? Yes. Is it related to my memory? Yes. Is there a sense of connection with that individual, that situation, circumstance? Yes. Is that still living inside of me? Yes. That's my subjectivity. Is it part of my identity? Yes. Is it part of my sense of who I am? Yes. Is it part of the selfhood, which has to do with experience and first-person perspective? Yes. All of that. Just talking to somebody for 15 minutes who I haven't seen 10 years ago, let's say, or I met 10 years ago, all of this is involved in that. It's so profound and it's so fast. And then we are in terms of self-mastery, which we'll get to later on, the question really will be, can we masterfully navigate through all those experiences? That's why we have the PTP program on Tuesday evenings for the practical application. Today's presentation on which is the foundations, this is highly technical, looking at the constructs themselves and looking at how researchers are trying to understand them and then to really unravel it in a much more academic manner. All right, so having said that, let's move on a little bit further here. Again, there's a lot of examples, but I'm see if I can get through this section, because next time I want to move to the third component here. So yet the subjectivity also presents notable challenges, particularly in philosophical and scientific explorations of the self, of the selfhood, of course. It's an exploration. We have the capacity to explore. So the primary issue lies in the inherent privacy of subjective experiences. See, this is a key point. My experiences are private to me. I can share them verbally with others, but who else has access to my internal, my experiences that are inherently private? I have a relationship with my mother, let's say, who's living in India. Okay, that's fine. But my relationship with her is inherently filled with privacy. It's not that I've made it that way. It's the way our brain mind works. The primary issue lies in the inherent privacy. Maybe that's how that word is pronounced. Privacy of subjective experiences. So given that no one can directly access the internal experiences of another individual, objectively analyzing or measuring these experiences can be exceptionally challenging. It's very difficult. I mean, how do you get to somebody's inner experience? Researchers are trying, obviously. Again, massive, ways of going about that. Qualitative research, quantitative research, survey research, double-blind procedures. There's something called the research hierarchy, and that's another corollary to all of this thing, from survey research all the way to experimental design, and quasi-experimental design is underneath that. And then you've got single subject design. There's so many research methods, qualitative methods, there's quantitative methods, and there's mixed methods in the research approaches to try to get to the inner experience of what others are actually experiencing. That's the challenge. So given that no one can directly access the inner experience, I don't know what happened here. Looks like I did something here. Let's see. Well, that's something new there. All right, just as well. Given that no one can directly access the internal experiences of another individual, objectively analyzing or measuring these experiences can be exceptionally challenging, obviously. So this raises significant questions about the methods used to study consciousness and underscores the need for innovative approaches that can capture the nuances of subjective experience. There's so many nuances in that. To take something simple like my relationship with my mother, there are thousands of nuances in that. How does somebody capture that? Is it even possible to objectively capture it? Maybe to some extent. So researchers have three opinions about that. One opinion is that it can be done if the analytical process is significantly developed, it can be quantitatively captured. Another set of research would say, no, it's too subjective. You'll never be able to fully quantitatively capture that. That is another group of researchers. And the third group would say, yeah, you can do a mixed approach and get to a lot of it by qualitative and quantitative approach. Qualitative is like you're asking about the person's experiences and then getting to the phenomenological analysis through philosophical background to get to that first person experience. Okay, I'm going a little fast here. I don't mean to do so, but I'm just mindful of time. I don't want to go too much into, because you could wind up getting a PhD degree or multiple PhDs in these subjects. That's absolutely true. You could take any one of these sentences and you could get a PhD in every single sentence. That's how this thing is constructed. So in summary, the complex dynamics of selfhood and personality and personal identity present both opportunities and challenges for philosophical and scientific exploration. These intricacies highlight the richness of human experience, which is true. I think we have to really appreciate that. The human experience is absolutely rich. It is so phenomenally rich that scientists have a challenge in front of them. And it underscores the need for continued research into understanding the complex landscape of selfhood, identity, and consciousness in general. So there's one more sentence here at the bottom, and I'm surprised. It's good that I got through this. We'll go into this one the next time, navigating the self, the multidimensional perspective. We'll look at that next time. So selfhood focuses on an individual's unique first-person experience and subjective experiences, while personal identity pertains to characteristics and societal roles that define an individual within a communal context. This distinction underscores the internal, subjective nature of selfhood versus the broader, external perception of identity, highlighting the interplay between personal experiences and societal definitions. So that's a little summary there of everything we've talked about, and I am on time here, 7:32. So there we go. All right. So I'll stop my presentation here and open it up for discussion dialogue.